It begins with light. Too much light. He has never seen this many things competing for attention. The corridor stretches forward in glass and polished steel. Moving walkways hum beneath steady footsteps. Voices overlap in languages he does not understand. But the walls are louder than the people. Panels. LED. Backlit. Overlapping. Perfume. Cars. Watches. Cameras. Chocolate. 10 versions of the same object. 10 different colors. 10 different promises. 10 different price points. Products are not presented as necessities. They are presented as variations. Each image assumes choice already exists. A woman smiles beside a car. A wrist emerges from a tailored sleeve, displaying a watch. A bottle catches the light as if it were an object of ceremony. Nothing references the state. Nothing references production. Nothing references history. Every image references preference. The Soviet traveler does not stop. He walks through. He has seen walls used for messaging before. He has seen banners promising harvests and progress. He has seen red slogans stretched across factory entrances. But this is different. Nothing here claims to build the future. Nothing here speaks about collective destiny. Every image speaks to one person. Buy this. Choose this. Prefer this. There are too many colors. Too many fonts. Too many brands competing for the same square meter of wall. In his country, walls speak with one voice. Here, walls argue. Here, walls compete. And competition is visible. He does not yet understand what unsettles him. It is not abundance. It is rivalry. And rivalry multiplies. Back home, advertising existed. But it did not compete. It informed. It announced. A poster might show bread, or shoes, or a television set. The message was simple. This product is available. No comparative pricing. No alternative brand beside it. No slogan suggesting superiority. There was no reason to persuade. Production quotas determined availability. Distribution determined access. Choice was administrative. When the state controls supply, persuasion becomes redundant. Advertising without competition becomes instruction. Instruction does not need imagination. No one needed to convince you. There was nothing to compare. Choice was administrative. That absence was structural. And it was invisible. Store windows were predictable. Packaging rarely changed. Labels were standardized. Colors were muted. Design followed uniform templates. In many cases, graphic design was institutional rather than commercial. The visual landscape reflected central planning. Fewer brands. Standardized typography. Limited variation. Walls carried messages, but they did not argue with each other. They did not overlap. They did not attempt to outperform. There was no incentive to differentiate. Differentiation requires rivalry. Rivalry requires autonomy. Autonomy introduces uncertainty. The system minimized uncertainty. Foreign magazines were restricted. Western catalogs were controlled. Television signals were filtered in border regions. Radio frequencies were monitored. The state did not merely regulate goods. It regulated exposure. Because exposure creates reference points. And reference points create dissatisfaction. If you never see alternatives, uniformity feels normal. The absence of comparison was not accidental. It was engineered. Soviet citizens did travel. Engineers attended trade fairs. Athletes competed abroad. Officials negotiated contracts. Artists performed internationally. But travel was managed. Briefings were conducted before departure. Instructions were given about contact with foreigners. Passports were collected in groups upon arrival. Hotel floors were assigned collectively. Movement was scheduled. Behavior was monitored. Conversations were sometimes noted. The corridor of advertising was not part of the official itinerary. It was transitional. An unintended window. Airports became exposure zones. Not fully Western. Not fully domestic. Duty-free shops displayed imported cigarettes and cosmetics. Glass shelves held dozens of near-identical products with slight variations. Glossy magazines lay stacked beside international newspapers. Fashion spreads. Technology reviews. Automotive comparisons. Each page assumed evaluation. Each advertisement assumed mobility. Mobility assumed substitution. Substitution is structural. If you can replace one product with another, you can replace one judgment with another. That logic extends beyond goods. The Soviet system could manage scarcity. It could justify delay. It could rationalize uniformity as efficiency. But it struggled to justify visible variation. In a supermarket at home, shelves might contain one type of canned fish, one type of detergent, one model of television. In the airport, shelves displayed 10 kinds of chocolate, 5 brands of cameras, multiple airlines competing for the same route. The difference was not simply quantity. It was segmentation. Advertising reveals segmentation. Segmentation reveals targeting. Targeting reveals diversity of demand. Diversity implies recognition of individual preference. That recognition was the structural fracture. The corridor did not persuade him to buy perfume. It suggested he was allowed to want something specific. And that suggestion had no domestic equivalent. That is when the system becomes visible. Not the Western system. The one he came from. He does not return with products. He returns with images. Images are harder to confiscate. In conversation, he does not describe the corridor in detail. There is no dramatic revelation. No ideological shift. But language changes. Someone mentions a watch. He remembers 5 different models displayed side by side. Someone mentions chocolate. He remembers a shelf divided into categories. Someone jokes about imported packaging. He notices the tone. It is subtle. Comparison does not arrive as protest. It arrives as reference. Small observations begin to accumulate. Over there, they had. Over there, you could choose. The phrase itself becomes a structure. Over there. The corridor was temporary. But the benchmark remains. He begins to see uniformity differently. Not as normal. As singular. Singular becomes measurable. Measurable becomes questionable. No one announces dissatisfaction. But repetition becomes visible. And once repetition becomes visible, monopoly becomes legible. The system relied on isolation of reference. Exposure dissolves that isolation quietly. Comparison spreads without slogans. Without meetings. Without speeches. It spreads through memory. And memory does not require permission. The return flight is quieter. The airport at home is dimmer. Lighting is flatter. Walls are uniform again. Announcements replace invitations. There are no overlapping panels. No layered persuasion. Just information. He does not speak about what he saw. There is nothing illegal in observing billboards. But comparison is internal. He walks past a shop window. One brand of shoes. One display arrangement. No competing model beside it. He enters a grocery store. Packaging is familiar. Predictable. Repetitive. No price comparison signage. No promotional urgency. He turns on the television. No commercials interrupt programming to suggest alternatives. No voice competes for preference. Advertising in the West was noisy. At home, silence is structural. The Soviet state did not forbid desire. It redirected it. Desire was collective. Directed toward production targets. Toward 5-year plans. Toward abstract futures. Western advertising directed desire toward immediate preference. Not future abundance. Present differentiation. That was the shock. Not neon. Not luxury. Not excess. But the visible normalization of choice. The corridor was temporary. The comparison was not. Once alternatives exist in memory, monopoly becomes visible. And once monopoly becomes visible, control becomes harder to maintain. The shock of Western advertising was not about products. It was about comparison. And comparison is corrosive.